Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we're going to be starting a new period 6. We're almost done with APUSH now. This is a big unit, probably the longest unit we'll have, period 6. I think it's period 7. Jeez, I can't even think right now. But this is probably the longest unit because it covers from, 1898 to 1945. I mean, or 1890 to 1945. I mean, that's just a lot. Okay. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into it. Chapter 19, everybody. So hopefully you're ready, because a lot of information happens during this time. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, 1890 and 1945. 1890 and 1945. Long time period. I believe it's like 8 more chapters. 7 or 8 chapters cover this period. So, and it covers, it covers, I can't even speak. It covers so much. It covers Spanish-American War. It covers the Progressive Movement. It covers World War I. It covers the Roaring 20s and the Spanish influenza. It covers the Great Depression. It covers the New Deal. It covers the World War II. People. We're getting into modern U.S. history now. So let's get into it. So from crisis to empire. So the politics of equilibrium. There are big ideas in the late 19th century. There was high voter turnout. There would be control of Congress switched between parties frequently. And Republicans were mainly supported by Northern Protestants, the middle class, and they supported higher tariff rates. The Democrats, however, were, supported by Catholics, immigrants, poorer workers, and they wanted low tariff rates. So how did the government support economic development? They gave subsidies to railroads, and they used the military to end work stoppages. So when unions went on strike, remember, early on during the Gilded Age, the government will side with the employers, not the employees, and the military would stop these work shortages and get them back to work. There are key terms to know. Stalwarts are Republicans that favored patronage, helping homies out, give them high paying jobs in new places. And that was the leader of the stalwarts were Roscoe Conkling. And then you have half-breeds, which favored reform in government. They're the leader of the Muggles at this time, if you want to call them half-breeds, was by James Blaine. No relation to David Blaine. If you don't know who that is, I just showed my age. Conkling on the left, Blaine on the right. So James A. Garfield, he'll become the 20th president, and he will actually be assassinated by a stalwart. And we're not really going to focus in on Chester A. Arthur's presidency, but just know 1883, the Pendleton Act. It was a civil service exam, and that was passed in order to limit patronage. James A. Garfield was not a person who favored patronage. So, stalwarts who do favor it, they're like, hey, get this guy out of office. Election of 1884 happens, and it's Grover Cleveland versus James Blaine. There is some dirty campaigning going on, kind of just, low blows. One campaign was Ma, where's my pa? And this is associated against Cleveland because there were rumors that Cleveland fathered a child out of wedlock. Cleveland will win, and he is more about that laissez-faire policy, the hands-off type of president in regards to government's interference in the economy. The tariff issue will separate Republicans and Democrats again. You have the Sherman Anti-Trust Act, 1890. You need to know this for sure. 1890, Sherman Anti-Trust Act. It was more symbolic than anything else. The purpose, obviously, is in its name. Antitrust was to break up trusts. In actuality, it was used to break up unions. And in the Sherman Anti-Trust Act, it is said that if there are groups of organizations that try and restrain trade, they can, be broken up. And some lawyers are going to word this differently and apply it to unions, because if unions were restraining trade, i.e. going on strike, they would break up unions. So it was meant to break up trusts, but in all actuality, it broke up unions. Need to know it. Here's the assassination of Cleveland, and here's Ma, where's my pa? I want my pa. Let's go over Cleveland. So some more. You have the McKinley tariff in 1890. He was Republican. Republicans always want to raise tariff rates. Think of that. Raise and Republican. You have some court cases. Munn versus Illinois, 1877. State governments could regulate industries when in the best interest of the public, so monitoring and regulating interstate commerce. However, a couple years later in the Wabash case, yet again, states could not regulate interstate commerce, and that overturned the Munn versus Illinois decision. So you have the Interstate Commerce Act, and it created the ICC, Interstate Commerce Commission, and will outlaw higher rates on short hauls than long hauls by railroad companies. So no longer, if I'm traveling, say from, let's say BART. Let's just make BART a train from back in the day. If I'm traveling from Fremont to Hayward, they're going to charge me $25 to ride from Fremont to Hayward. But there's another train track that goes from Fremont to, let's say, Oakland, and they're going to charge $20 for the fare. It's not going to let them charge for shorter hauls than longer ones. Okay, and the Interstate Commerce Act also said railroads are ours, must publish their rates. So they got to know. People can't be left in the dark. Here's William McKinley. He will become future president. All right, so this is a big idea, the Agrarian Revolt. So farmers, families with farms, okay, and we talked about it, how the railroad companies were outstripping and restricting farmers and charging them obscene rates. And so now you're going to have farmers create groups, political parties and other organizations to fight for farmers' rights. So you have something called the Grange, which provided social and economic opportunities for farmers. They sought to end monopolies in railroads, and they wanted government ownership of businesses. And this will lead to the Populist Party, which in turn will turn into the Progressive Party. But the Populist Party kind of takes their ideas from the farmers. So now you got the Democrats, you got the Republicans, and now you got the Populists. And so they're going to put forth this platform called the Omaha Platform, suggested and written by this guy, Ignacio Donnelly. He's right there. And what their platform is, this is what, say it's like a presidential platform. This is the party platform. This is what they support through and through. They want a free and unlimited coinage of silver at the rate of 16 to 1, meaning 16 coins of silver equals 1 gold coin. All right, and that's going to help because there's more supply of silver than there is gold in the country. They would want a graduated income tax, redistribution of wealth. They wanted government ownership of the telephone and telegraph and railroads, again, because the farmers are getting pushed out. You have initiative, referendum, and recall. We'll see that later in the next chapter, but those are Progressive Party platforms. They wanted a postal savings bank where there's a safe repository run by the government. They wanted limited government land grants for settlers rather than railroad companies, and the direct election of senators. That's Donnelly. Okay, so the crisis. We have another panic of 1893. And if you wouldn't have guessed it, it was caused by over-speculation. And other helps that caused it were there was a stock market crash and overproduction, again, over-speculation. So results, the government repeals the Sherman Silver Act. So then you have this group called Coxey's Army, a bunch of poor people trying to protest. They're going to advocate for public works programs. They marched a group of unemployed individuals to Washington, which sadly was broken up by police. And then they're going to call, again, this idea of free silver, having silver back the value of the dollar at a ratio of 16-1. And again, it would favor farmers and debtors, okay? And it would be easier for farmers and debtors to pay off their debt. There's more money in the money supply. So here you have Coxey's Army. Okay, across the gold. William Jennings Bryan is a big name during this time to not become president. He won the Democratic nomination in 1896. He was a great orator. He will challenge William McKinley. And he gave a speech called the Cross of Gold speech at the Democratic National Convention. And like I said, like Henry Clay, he ran for president 3 times and will fail all 3 times. In his speech, it's again this idea of the gold standard and the silver issue. We will answer their demands for a gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. In the election of 1896, it was the first modern campaign where people went out and campaigned for themselves, because back then they just went on the word of their platform, no real debates. So you have Bryan advocating lowering the tariff. The Democrats, again, he's a Democrat. The Democrats want a lower tariff rate, but ultimately Republicans win and McKinley becomes president. So there's William Jennings Bryan being carried on the shoulders of fellow Democrats. Okay, imperialism. We talked about this last year in world history. Hopefully it'll seem as a refresher. So the U.S. gets involved in imperialism. The U.S. sought for expansion overseas. Why? Well, Manifest Destiny kind of completed itself. From sea to shining sea, America owned coast to coast of the United States. So technically the frontier is closed. You have a man named Alfred T. Mahan. He wrote a book called The Influence of Sea Power. And he said the control of the sea was important for world dominance. He will urge the United States and other countries to build up their navy. So there's going to be a lot of naval development at this time. And that would be favored heavily by future President Teddy Roosevelt and other expansionists. And then with imperialism, we have this idea of Hawaii. And why was it attractive? Well, it was a huge market for sugar production, a lot of sugar plantations. The Dole Company, if you've ever been to Hawaii, that's still there. So since the 1840s, the U.S. had foreign interest in Hawaii. And then the U.S. wanted to annex Hawaii later on. 1890, a tariff exemption ended on Hawaii. So now there would be high prices on imports from there. And that's going to hurt U.S. farmers. Did I mention from this time, between like the 1840s to 1890, Americans will also travel to Hawaii. And so you have these companies that are American that are shipping stuff to America. But since it's coming from Hawaii, that's causing tariff rates to go up. And that's hurting farmers there, hurting farmers here. Okay. So you have Queen Liliuokalani, I'm sorry if I butchered the name, believed that native Hawaiians should control these islands. The queen would be overthrown in 1893 after a revolt by planters. So the treaty to annex Hawaii was initially rejected by Grover Cleveland, and it wasn't until McKinley where Hawaii would become annexed. And remember, annex is like hungry hippos. They just add on to their country. So that's what the United States did with Hawaii. And in 1878, the U.S. naval station was built in Samoa. So now there's a more United States influence presence in the Pacific. So here's Alfred C. Mahan, and here's the Queen Liliuokalani. All right, so war with Spain. 1895, Cuba revolted against Spain following a policy of scorched earth policy, as we've learned in world history. That means, burning everything in sight that was, that would be seen to hurt the Spanish. Well, the U.S. was very concerned, and I'll tell you why. There was $50 million worth of investments in Cuba from Americans and the American government, as well as $100 million of annual trade with Cuba back and forth between the two countries. So if they're trying to destroy themselves from the inside, it's going to hurt the U.S. as well. So you have the Spanish general in charge of Cuba. I think his first name was Victoriano, I can't remember. But his nickname was Butcher, Weiler, or Whaler. It's an interesting to pronounce it in the Spanish form. And he's going to try and crush the rebellion. He will put Cubans in barbed wire reconcentration camps. And this is where yellow journalism comes to play, by William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. You furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war. Okay, remember, it's that over sensationalization, if that's a word. Sensationalization, I guess it sounds true. The over exaggeration. Okay. The Spanish minister spoke negatively about McKinley, called him weak in what's called the Delome letter. And that's the butcher, I think it's Valeriano. Okay, so what really starts it is the USS Maine mysteriously blew up in I think it's the Havana Harbor, killing 260 sailors. The USS Maine and subsequent pictures were a huge cause for the U.S. involvement in the war. February 15th, 1898. April 11th, 1898, McKinley sent a message to Congress urging war with Spain. You have the Teller Amendment. Once the U.S. overthrew Spanish rule, Cubans would be given their freedom. You thought. You also have the group, the Rough Riders, led by Teddy Roosevelt and others. Group of volunteers that played a role in the Spanish-American War in Cuba. August 12th, 1898, the armistice was signed. 400 Americans died in battle, but 5,000 died due to disease. And that's good to know. Good to know. You need to know, because more soldiers died in preparation for the war than they actually died in battle. Also, yellow journalism is going to highlight the atrocities, so-called atrocities, the Spanish were doing to the Cubans. I believe there was one quote where there was blood on the fields, there were blood on the houses, everywhere you looked, blood, blood, blood. And it's that, imagery that gets put into the readers, and they're like, oh my God, the Spanish are so horrible. We need to fight them. So you have, here's the remnants of the explosion, but here is the World, which was, I think that was Hearst's newspaper. Main explosion caused by bomb or torpedo, ? They don't really know what caused it. Was it set off by the Americans to provoke a war with the Spanish in Cuba? Was it the Cubans lighting fire to them? Was it the Spanish? Was it self-inflicted? We never know. And here's Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders. Okay, so war with Spain, quick and easy. What did America gain? Guam, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Philippines. But the key issue in the Philippines was, what do we do with them? McKinley said we need to Christianize and civilize them. Again, I think we talked about this yesterday. Actually, no, we didn't. So the Anti-Imperialist League leaders were, prominent members were Mark Twain, the presidents of Harvard and Stanford, Samuel Gompers, and even our guy, Andrew Carnegie. And they argued that didn't Filipinos deserve the same consent of the government that the United States sought for from the British? But then we have this poem. We read it in the Imperialism DBQ last year in World History, White Man's Burden, Rudyard Kipling. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. Take up the white man's burden. Okay. It is the U.S.'s duty to Christianize and civilize the Filipinos. Remember, they weren't ready. They weren't ready to be governed by themselves. It's just an excuse to take over their land. So you have the Foraker Act of 1900, where Puerto Ricans were granted a limited degree of popular government, later granted U.S. citizenship in 1917, called the Jones Act. And here you got Uncle Sam stepping on some Cuban, I think that's Cuba, the white man's burden. It's our burden. So the Republic as an empire. The key question with this new land annexed by us, does the Constitution follow the flag? Meaning, does the Constitution protect these new people? And it's what's called insular cases that's going to go forth and basically mean the Constitution did not apply to these new areas. Subjects may be subject to American rule, but they did not enjoy all American rights. So in 1902, the U.S. withdrew themselves from Cuba. Yeah, kind of. Mainly because of this Platt Amendment, where Cuba can't have treaties with other countries that compromises their independence. The U.S. can intervene to restore order. And Guantanamo Bay was given to the U.S. So, again, it's the Monroe Doctrine is going, Cuba's in the Caribbean, down below, 90 miles below Florida, okay? And again, it's that U.S. sphere of, not really sphere of influence, but the U.S.'s control of the Western Hemisphere comes up here. And, Teddy Roosevelt and his Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine will come up again in the future. So the Philippines thought that they would receive independence like Cuba, but they were not included in peace negotiations. So the person who helped lead our revolt against the Spanish in the Philippines, Emilio Aguinaldo, is going to want revenge against us. So he's going to lead a guerrilla warfare campaign style in the Philippines against the United States, wanting to kick us out of the islands. But that's not going to work. Aguinaldo will be captured. That's Aguinaldo. Okay, last slide. The Republic as an empire continued. Europe is, well, we're going to shift over to China. And that was one of the main reasons why the U.S. wanted a foot in the door in the Philippines, because that's going to lead them to build up that Navy to have an overseas influence, this world domination idea. Well, China, everyone thought America was the West Indies and China, nah. So, you know, as time goes on, China's a big trader. China's a big company, big country that trades, okay, and has all these foreign goods to be consumed by, you know, the world's leading consumption country, the United States. So Europe had established spheres of influence in China, and the U.S. was careful for missing out. A bit of case of FOMO. So you have Secretary of State John Hay established this open door note or open door policy, where the purpose was to ensure that the U.S. would not be locked out of China. And, you know, this idea is spheres of influence where these countries, Germany, France, Britain, United States, rent out properties of land that contain natural resources that they can take back to their country, but they don't really pay China double. They just pay them for the land. They don't really pay them for the resources they took back. And the U.S. wanted a piece of the pie. Okay, so you have the secret society of the Harmonious Fists is what it translates, but they were nicknamed. Members of this secret group were called Boxers, Harmonious Fists, and English translation, bad. So they called them the Boxers, and this is what's called the Boxer Rebellion in China, where they wanted to get rid of the, quote, death to the foreign devils. However, they would be broken up by a multinational troop or regiment to put down these Boxers. So here you have everyone getting a piece of the pie. Germany, Great Britain. I believe this is China. I'm not China. Philippines, Japan, France. I have no idea. Russia, maybe Russia. And this is China. All right. So that was a long lecture, a lot of notes, okay, but a lot of information. All right. So hopefully you guys learned something new. Hopefully you heard some old information about imperialism, but more from the lens of an American lens. Okay. So hopefully you did enjoy. If you did, smash that like button. And as always, stay safe, wash your hands. Peace.